Darren Dreger from TSN joins us on the eve of the Four Nations face-off. We'll get into some of that in just a little bit. Team USA getting the hit with no Quinn Hughes. Before we do that, Darren, after all of this content that the Vancouver Canucks have generated, are you sort of sad that we've taken a pause in the NHL season?
No, I think we could all use a bit of a break. Obviously the Vancouver Canucks and those who are deeply involved. And, look, some of the stories haven't been written yet, clearly, right, as to how this roster is further going to get changed between now and the 7th of March. But as you guys can attest to, there's certainly a different feel to the Vancouver Canucks now. And what we don't know is how significant that change is going to look. Again, when you roll closer to March 7th, I mean, what I expect is coming out of this Four Nations, Jim Rutherford, Patrick Galvin, it's age old, Jimmy Rutherford jumps in early and they've done that again. But more and more I'm hearing from other managers around the league that when the Four Nations is over, it will be a frenzy again. And if it's even half as interesting as it was over the last few weeks, then we're in for something. We're in for something leading up to the trade deadline, and that's going to make my good friend and colleague James Duthie unhappy because he's going to be doing a lot of juggling on the 7th of March if that is applied.
He's already been spewing hate for trades if it happens. BJ, what do you want to win?
Yeah, well, in the past, I mean, Jimmy Rutherford's trend has been always to add defensemen, and here we are talking about Carson Soucy maybe on the way out. I mean, do you really think that's something they really go towards, or is that just them spitballing, thinking about where they might want to go?
Well, it does feel, Patrick, a little bit like spitballing because, when you look at the Vancouver Canucks blue line now, it's pretty good. Yeah. It's pretty good, and it has the potential of getting better in the not too distant future based on, now they've got a real nice class of developing young defense. And we talked about this last week. I'm a fan of Victor Mancini. I think he's going to be a real good NHL player. I do. You have to be patient with defensemen. That's just the way it is, like goaltenders. But if the right piece pops into the market, then of course they're going to look at it. I mean, that's what every general manager will tell you. But the heavy lifting for Vancouver, for the most part, I think is done. But then you look up the middle of the ice and they're probably going to need a centerman. And if Elias Pettersson doesn't find his game, then that just elevates that need, not the want, the need to do something more significant at center ice. But I can tell you, fellas, I'm on this story, not just specific to Vancouver, across the league, and how difficult it's going to be to acquire that good young centerman, right? You're going to have to want to pay the price or be willing to pay that price. And are we sure that Dylan Cousins is actually in play? He might have been back when the negotiations, discussions around the idea of Pettersson and Bo Byram would have been included and Dylan Cousins and all of that bigger picture, sure. And I think that Kevin Adams has done a real good job just recognizing where Buffalo is at. And that's why he hasn't slammed the door on any of the speculating specific to Dylan Cousins. But there's so many teams that would be interested and be willing to pay the price for Dylan Cousins. I'm not convinced that deal is going to happen. There may not be enough time. And if you're Adams, are you sure if you're willing to move that piece that the deal that you're going to get for Dylan Cousins isn't better in the offseason? Because now you're attracting a bigger audience. So if we can just put Dylan Cousins as an outlier right now, then who are we looking at center? Braden Shen? Sure. Braden Shen is willing to waive his no trade clause, then yeah, I mean, I know that, and I reported this last week, that St. Louis is wisely gauging the market. And then you've got the Scott Laughton rumors out of Philadelphia. Vancouver willing to pay a real steep price for Scott Laughton. And then for me, that market starts to ratchet down a little bit. I have mentioned Ryan O'Reilly because, again, I put him as a bit of an outlier. I really do. I just think center is going to be tough because the buyers probably outweigh the sellers, the guys who have significant pieces that you can see would make a team like Vancouver better.
Laughton's a fascinating study in terms of what that price would be for him as a 30-year-old never a gaudy point getter in any way, shape, or form, but he's got a fabulous contract with an additional year here at $3 million. So it's like a super rental, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, what do they extract out of a team? Like, what are we talking here?
Well, they've wanted a first-round draft pick all along. And I guess Danny Briere thinks that he's still going to get that. And until the trade deadline comes and goes, I mean, you have to hold to your price. But the Calgary trade that the Flyers made was also very interesting because they moved out 2 young pieces in Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. And, they get Pelche back and they get Kuzmenko back. But really, this was the Philadelphia Flyers trying to create more cap space. And I don't think that they're necessarily going to be a big player on the trade front. That could change as we, get closer to the deadline and into the offseason. But maybe it takes some of the burn off that the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. But the Flyers actually feel like their fan base is getting a little antsy. Like they need this hockey club to be relevant again. And they're a good competitive team, but we're talking about locking down a playoff team and getting to that place where you can contend again. So they want to be a big game hunter. They do. And it feels more like they're going to try and utilize some of that cap space in the offseason. So, let's see what the market is on Laughton. No short of interest. The Maple Leafs for sure are interested. All those teams that are looking for a center can appreciate what he can bring. But you're right. I mean, the offensive numbers aren't there. Defensively, he's a respected piece, and he's a high-character player. So there's a lot of reasons why Vancouver should be interested in Scott Laughton.
You talk about cap space, Darren. Canucks have a ton of it. What could they possibly do as a leverage point, as an advantage point on a team in a trade?
Yeah, and I mean, it's currency. It literally is. Especially for other teams around the league that don't have the same luxury right now of having that level of cap space. So, and I look again, because of when you look at the standings and you see how tight things are primarily in the East, you are looking at teams that don't have that cap space, right? So how much of that is going to matter? And there are teams that are going to have to make a decision in the not too distant future coming out of the Four Nations face-off where we're not there. We're just not there. And so what can we do to better our position, maybe bring a player back, all of that stuff. So I do think that the cap space that the Canucks have puts them in a different market. Okay, if we're going head-to-head Canadian teams here, Toronto doesn't have that. I mean, that's exactly what the Toronto Maple Leafs need, and they don't have it. And they have a need at center ice. They do. They love the idea of Braden Shen. And it's less about the younger pieces. If Toronto can find a team like St. Louis that is keen on a hockey trade, then Toronto can make that deal. Because they've got prospects like Danforth, a young defenseman, coming. You've got Easton Cowan playing in the Ontario League. You've got Fraser Minton, who's a pro between the NHL and the Toronto Marlies. But is that enough? Is that enough? Or is there going to be have to be more to make the cap numbers work from the Maple Leafs perspective? And again, that's a game that the Vancouver Canucks don't have to play at center. So that could be their advantage.
Laughton's kind of in between because he's got that additional year. But do the Canucks want to address the long-term center ice thing here, or are they just looking to get a little bit better before the playoffs begin? How much of a rush are they to find a true 2C? Are they going to try to hope that Filip Chytil becomes that?
Well, I mean, based on the way that Filip Chytil has played, and knock on wood here, this guy can stay healthy. For me, it's less about what he does on the ice. That's pretty obvious. When he's healthy, he's a contributing player. It can be an impactful piece. And you're seeing that there is a trade bump here that we're realizing with Filip Chytil and how he's contributed. But look, the reason why the New York Rangers were okay with including him in that deal is because they have long-term concerns with his health, right? So I don't think that Vancouver shares that yet. So at center, it's going to be best available player. It would be nice, I think, for the Vancouver Canucks if they got a little bit of term, because then it's one less thing to have to worry about as you go into the later part of the season and into the off season. But I'm fascinated again by who is available, who isn't available, what might be available at center. Because again, I think that there was a buzz created when Braden Shen's name entered the process last week, and with that full no trade, he obviously, he's gonna be the guy that determines whether or not he gets moved or not. But I think of Nick Bjugstad with Utah. Utah's a team that's in it. Who doesn't want to add a 6'5" centerman, who's got some versatility to his game? I look at Luke Kunin, who's with the San Jose Sharks. He's going to get traded. He's not a bad player, but where does he fit? Is he a 3C on a good team, a 3C, or is he lower? Is he a center? Is he a winger? I mean, he's been playing mostly to the wing, but you could say the same thing about Scotty Laughton, right? Because they're trying to develop Noah Cates and how he's played for the Philadelphia Flyers. So I'm kind of going in circles here with the centers because we keep chewing on the same type of guys, but who is best available? You're not going to know until you get into the nitty-gritty of what that negotiation is and trade protection and who's willing to go west.
Certainly here we've had a sense that Brock Boeser and the Canucks are not close on a new deal. Have you heard anything different? And what is the buzz? What would be the buzz out there from other teams looking at him as a potential trade target?
Yeah, I mean, there would be a buzz. Again, you guys know this guy well. Seems to be a real popular player in that market, right?
Yeah.
And when you look now at the cap projections, who blames Ben Hankinson for playing hardball? And I know that there have been some numbers that have been thrown out there, specific to what his market value might be. You're not going to know that until you actually get into the market. And that's the job of Hankinson and every player agent. But now what's been pushed to the side is the calendar. Because even though year 2 and year 3 of the cap projection that was released recently by the League of the Players Association somewhat is written in pencil and could be adjusted, you're not talking about a significant change, I don't think. I don't believe that will be the case. Brock Boeser on the open market is going to command a high dollar. More money, I think, than the Vancouver Canucks are going to want to spend. And so they're going to have a decision, I think, that needs to be made on March 7th. But I do think, and I've said this on the Rain Dregs podcast before too, Boeser is, I believe, a disciple of the teachings of Rick Tocchet as head coach of the Vancouver Canucks. And if Rick Tocchet isn't the coach of the Vancouver Canucks, or Boeser doesn't 100% know that Rick Tocchet, well, that's going to factor into whatever decision he's going to be making. It's not just about opportunity, financial or otherwise. You want to go to a place where you're comfortable with the direction the team is going and what your role is going to be in that direction. So last time I checked with management in Vancouver on Boeser, it was, hey, we just need to let the dust settle here for a little bit. No different than the Elias Pettersson rumors and whether or not they're going to, be kicked to the curb or no, just let things settle, get through the Four Nations face-off. And, I'm sure that there'll be conversations with Hankinson about Boeser during this break. You can still do business and managers will continue to do their business during this time. But I don't see any resolution on that front anytime soon.
Before we move on to Four Nations, any insight on Demko's injury here? Do we take Rick Tocchet at face value that it's not the knee?
No, I do, yeah. And I don't think that he would be that. I mean, he's an honest man, and when he can show transparency, I think for the most part he does.
Yeah. He doesn't lead astray. You're right.
No, that's my point. And what value would there be in him being that straightforward if that weren't the case, or if he's trying to push us away from that story? I mean, the best I got was he tweaked something. All right, thanks, Tips. Pretty obvious he pulled or tweaked something. I mean, we could all see that. But unfortunate, pretty obvious as well when you look at how well he was playing of late. It had been a long time coming. So everybody's hoping that this bit of a break, I guess is what we'll call it, will help him mend and he'll be back to form again.
Four Nations has been pretty good in terms of buy-in from all the players. We looked at that Canadian power play unit on the ice today.
Which unit? I mean, holy smokes.
Kidding me? But does Quinn Hughes play in the tournament if it's the Olympics, do you think? Is that the difference that we're seeing here, for guys like that where, maybe if this is something more substantial, the guys are willing to take the bullets here, but for a guy like Quinn Hughes, it's just not worth it?
Yeah, I don't know that, to be fair. This is a challenge because it is the introduction to the international calendar. That's what it is. But it's not best on best. It's best on available best, right? Yes. I mean, not having Leon Draisaitl and David Pastrnak. Nobody, they didn't write the rules to this. And then, of course, not having the availability of the Russian players. I mean, that's, when you think historically best on best, that's what we're talking about here. And so we don't have that. I feel, this is my own view, and I don't have this from Quinn or anyone associated with Quinn Hughes of the Vancouver Canucks. The Olympics are better and different. And I think that the decision, as difficult as this was, and it was a real tough one, because I've been to the championships where Quinn Hughes was there representing Team USA and loved every second of it. I mean, no one wraps themselves in the flag more than the Hughes family. And I've seen it at all levels with Jack and Quinn especially. But you want to get Ellen and Jimmy riled up, you just get talking international hockey and who's better and why, right? So this was a real difficult decision, but it would have been that much more difficult if we're talking about the Olympics. I think that's fair.
Hughes's, Tkachuk's, someday it'll be on the Olympic stage, right?
Yeah, for sure, and that time is coming. And from a Canadian perspective, I feel for Mark Scheifele as an example. This guy was put on alert Friday night after that game. He was told, "Look, if Sid can't go, man, you're going. You're the guy." I'm sure he had travel plans, and I'm sure that he'll take advantage of the break that it seems likely now he's going to have, that Crosby's come out and said, "I'm good to go. I'm playing in the tournament." I don't think they're going to, I haven't scoured X or social media. I don't think anybody's mentioned anything around Mark Scheifele. Nope. I know he was put on alert on Friday night after their game, but similar to Hughes, Scheifele would be fine with that. I think he should have been on the roster, to be fair. I think that he earned it. But now he's got to be thinking about the World Cup. He has to be thinking about the Olympics and just, doing everything that he can to make those Canadian teams moving forward. So now that Sid has confirmed he's in, my excitement as a fan of hockey goes up considerably, because it would have been brutal to not have him participate. Because you're right. You look at that number one power play and you've got Makar, McDavid, Reinhart, Crosby, and McKinnon. That's power play one, 4 forwards and Cale Makar. And then who do you have on the other side? Theodore and Morrissey, Braden Point, Mitch Marner, and Mark Stone. That's second power play. Like, come on, man.
Don't take a penalty.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, right. And Crosby is net front. Like, hey, where are we going to slot you in? Like, why you go there? Like,
amazing. And I quickly had a look. I quickly had a look at the lineup for Team USA, and it looks like they're going with Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, and Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, 1, 2, 3. Who's the first line? Does it really matter? You just have to put 4, 3-man lines out there, and we can call line 1, 3, 2, 4. It doesn't matter. So that's what gets me excited with Four Nations looming here.
Well, we'll see if we fully get reeled in by the tournament as it goes on. As for you, sir, thanks for doing this, and we'll touch base coming up here very soon.
All right. Thanks, Blake, and good seeing you, Patrick.